It's a great privilege of mine today to be here with Professor Richard Dawkins, who has a compendious list of accolades, which would be far too extensive to go into, so I'll merely constrain it to tutored by a Nobel laureate and a Fellow of the Royal Society, which are academic credentials that speak for themselves. So, Professor, a pleasure. So I guess this cuts to the core of it is, I know you're a great Douglas Adams fan, and one of the quotes from one of the Douglas Adams characters is, "I would far rather be right than happy any day." And if religion makes people happy, to an extent, does it matter if they are right or not?
I think it's a false opposition. I think you can be both right and happy. If I was forced to choose, I think I would agree that I'd rather be right than happy. I think to be happy with an illusion, you might as well take a happy drug and cut yourself off from reality. I do think that there's something beautiful about reality, something beautiful about the truth, about the real world. And so I prefer to be both right and happy, but if I were absolutely forced to choose, I think I would go for reality.
No, I think I would concur. Life is far more interesting if you don't walk the path of comfortable illusions. So why do you think there is religion at all? I mean, if you subscribe that we are an emergent pattern of evolution, is there a real simple reason why there is religion at all? And what benefit does it provide for the organisms? Or is it a sort of genetic burden that you carry?
Well, the fact that you opened by the quote from Douglas Adams suggests that you're going for the idea that religion is somehow comforting or consoling, and that that's why we have it. There's no doubt that it is a human universal in the sense that all human cultures have had it. It's not universal in the sense that all individuals have it. But it does seem to be very widespread in the same sort of way as incest avoidance is and sexual desire itself is. So you could say it's just because it's comforting and maybe comforts people when they're bereaved or frightened of death or something of that sort. I don't think it's all that, though. I think part of it is ignorance. People do have a genuine questing curiosity for where things come from, why we exist, what's it all about, where does the world come from. And religion provides a lousy explanation for that, but nevertheless it's superficially satisfying. And before we had scientific explanations to answer those sorts of questions, people might have superficially thought that religious answers were satisfying in that way.
I would probably contest that, and I think the way that I'd come at it is the proposed mechanism that it is a social bonding thing. And the core observation here is religions are polarizing. Polarizing a society is good if, for the survival of small societies, that if you're in it's generally observed that if you stress a society, the first thing people do is look for security. And they do that by actually bonding together in smaller communities, which raises the security locally at the detriment of the rest of the society. And religion is basically a sort of catalyst in doing that.
When I answered you first, I was giving psychological answers, which is very different from Darwinian survival value answers. And now you've produced a Darwinian survival value answer to the question, which I'm very happy to do because I'm a Darwinian after all. I'm not that keen on explanations that work at a group level. So if we're looking for a survival value answer for why do we have the psychological predispositions to religion, I wouldn't look first for something like a social bonding mechanism. That might be true, but I would look first for something that works at the level of the individual rather than at the level of the group. What is it that actually benefits an individual in terms of survival and reproduction, rather than what benefits a group? But really, because groups are not things that reproduce.
Yes. But really the key point here is when modern humans first emerged, obviously you know that small populations can change much quicker in terms of genetics than big ones. Well, what's important is really what were the driving forces that selected the genes in that relatively small population. And if the key point was that that you have small tribes of groups that are actually in competition for each other, the ability to organize yourself to fight as a group is important. Those who scatter and run away are wiped out. Yes. And if you look at society, the humans are obviously a very social species, and we're also a very hierarchical social species. You would know about the Milgram experiments, yes?
The Milgram experiments demonstrate that about 2/3 of people would be willing to perform actions that would likely kill someone they don't know, if ordered to do so by an authority figure. The experiment's been widely reproduced under a variety of guises and invariably produces similar results. If mankind learns only one thing from the Holocaust, it's that those who starved the death camps were likely ordinary people, no different from you or I, or your best friend or your neighbour.
You would know about the Milgram experiments, yes? So we are biologically tuned to respond to authority figures, and we work in groups. And I would see religion as a catalyst for polarizing societies, especially when they're stressed. I mean, we see it in England that there is, since the society has been stable, there is less need for religion. But the second you take that stability away, almost the first thing, the lines almost of the inhomogeneity of society almost always come down the lines of religion. You know, for instance, Iraq would be a very good example. It was a fairly homogeneous country until you deprive them of the security. And the first thing that individuals look for in those societies is like-minded people to stick with. And in that sense, religion is a good candidate for a social bonding mechanism.
Well, I agree with that, and I think it's true that religion is a polarizer, and religion is a sort of beacon of loyalty that people hang on to. I would prefer not to see that as a mechanism of group survival. If it incidentally may help a group to have great loyalty to a tribal god of some sort. And I could easily imagine that those tribes that have a warlike tribal god, like the Yahweh, the god of the Jews, might be more likely to win in battle than a tribe that has a peaceful god. But I don't think that's why we have those gods. I would rather go to the level of the individual psychology and pick up on something you said about authority, tendency to obey authority, and say, let's look for a survival value, for a psychological predisposition to obey authority. And once you've got that, then religion tends to follow more or less automatically.
Yes, I mean, in many senses, religion is an obvious construct when you actually look at what people can do with their minds that maybe other critters can't. We are obviously very good at interacting with other people, and we actually have the ability to create models of people in our mind. So I can have an argument with a phantasm of, say, you, for instance, and this can actually be very good for predicting things, for enabling. But you now bring these two together, the ability to interact with people and the ability to create models, and you now have the ability to have a god.